everyone, and welcome to Real Talk Radio. I'm your host, Hillary Ramo. Today, we're going to be talking a little differently than we have in the past few weeks. We're going to be talking about some spirituality, and we're going to be discussing sentient beings with my wonderful friend, and I just looked up to her so much, Katrina Clay. Through her roles as a publisher and director of SIPN, Saratoga Integrative Practitioners Network, she has a wide range of knowledge of healing modalities and a vast network of expert colleagues. She received her Shapeshifter Practitioner Certification in 2004 by John Perkins, who I had the honor of interviewing way back when, and has taught a variety of workshops of her own creation that stem from John's modern-day shamanic work. We're going to be talking about what that means and how to integrate shamanic work into your daily lives today, among other things. These workshops, she uses her drum as a conduit to reach deep within. She's a self-professed perpetual student of the world, aren't we all? She is a lover of animals and nature and music, and seeing all as guides for living an authentic and symbolic life. Katrina founded the regional wellness publication called the Healing Springs Journal here in upstate New York in the northeastern United States back in 2012. It is now upstate New York's original resource for healing. I also write a wonderful art issue where I highlight local artists in each of those, so you should check that out. Through her roles, she has come to a great understanding of how animals and their consciousness interact with humans, and she also leads horse meditations where groups of people go and work with the horses in the fields and meditate with them. And she's got a lot of really great things to share about her work with that. And I think the lessons that brings, we can all relate to very deeply. And perhaps it's something we really need to get back to at this point in our lives and where the world's at and all this craziness going on. So we're going to slow it down today, and we're going to do a little bit of spiritual healing, and we're going to talk about how we can express that consciousness with other sentient beings that we might have in our lives or come across. And she's here today to talk about what that all means, and I can't wait to hear what she has to say. Welcome, Katrina.
Thank you, Hillary. It's so great to be here.
Well, it took us long enough to put this show together, and here we are. And finally, and I think that, we started talking about doing this show, I think back in the beginning of summer, actually, and we were trying to put it together, and we just kept running into some obstacles. And now here we are finally on the air live, and we can talk about this wonderful topic. So let's get started. Let's talk about you first and share a little bit more about your background, your shamanic training, and how you came to be doing work with these wonderful creatures.
Well, my background, oh gosh, because when I hear about the animals, I think about being a child and having that connection that is so open at that time. So to repeat how I became a modern shamanic practitioner seems so close. I can barely even think about what to say for it, but I'll try. So my work has kind of evolved into my own way of using the modern shamanic journey. And what I do is lead people on their own journeys. I don't really journey for other people, where some practitioners will do that, and they bring back teachings from the spirit world to the human and the physical world. And I feel for my practice, it's really important today, in today's age specifically, to take responsibility for ourselves and our own healing. And so that's why I lead people on their own journeys, and then they can experience the healing for themselves and the teachings that are really there for them without having me in the middle to tell them, what happened.
Well, I think that's something that is really important these days, because you can find a lot of people who offer services. You hear the word shamanic and you think a lot of preconceived ideas, I think, pop into people's minds. And modern day shamanism perhaps is much different than what we might consider traditional shamanism. And I can appreciate what you just said, because most of the time people will go to a healing practitioner, and the healing practitioner takes on the role of the healer, bringing the healing in and doing all of that work. When in fact, and I'm a true believer in this, I really believe it's about the client or the person who's seeking help going and finding for themselves, and perhaps just needing a facilitator to help do that, whether it's a guided meditation or a trance type thing, or however you get your clients into that space. I think it's really important for people to remember not to give all their power away to the guru, healer, shaman, however you title that, and learn how to find their own space in the healing world. Unfortunately, the New Age world has brought in a lot. And over the last decade especially, we've had so much advancement, I think, in healing, what that means, and what we do to actually heal, and how we help to seek out that, facilitation. But again, a lot of people really just want it done for them.
Yeah.
So when you take a person into a process and you give them the option of finding it for themselves, do they sometimes seem surprised?
Yes, they do seem surprised. And yet ultimately you can feel, and so this is an odd thing about reclaiming your own power, which sounds so new agey, but it's,
but it's true.
It's true. Yeah. I haven't come up with a better phrase that doesn't sound so, whatever, but it is when you do pull yourself back into your own power, it's almost shocking at this stage of society, because we're never really taught how to be there. Now, some people naturally can do it without having been taught or even had a healing. Some people can just be there and aren't really pulled outwards. All right, so maybe I should explain further about what I'm talking about, because sometimes I do that where I'm talking about something and I don't want to give the explanation and it doesn't make sense. But so what I mean by being in true power is when you are able to pull back all of your energy from the external sources that sometimes receive our power. So like, say we have every day we're given 100 megahertz. I don't even know what a megahertz is. So we'll just assume
megahertz. Maybe we
megahertz. Okay, yeah, whatever. So whatever, yeah, megahertz. Yeah, we're given 100 megahertz a day to use, and if we are constantly looking outside of ourselves and giving belief system for one, maybe we give some belief system 20 of our megahertz, and a person, or maybe our boss, another 10, and so forth, our kids another 40, something like that. Mm-hmm. We end up with only, say, 10 megahertz of our own. I really like that, by the way.
Oh, good. You can have it.
Okay. Of our own, and that's going to be running our system, and we really need more than just 10 megahertz. We're going to need at least, say 80. This is an imprecise science, but we're going to need more than just 10%. So what I mean by being in your power is pulling back those little tentacles that we send out to other people and allowing it to animate our own system instead of somebody else's.
Well, that's a good point, because we have to learn how to hold on to our own power. Most people have a problem with the word power. Power is kind of a trigger word, if you will, for a landslide of things, and all kinds of things come out of people, and they think you shouldn't be looking for power. What does power mean from a shamanic perspective?
Right. So power could also be termed life force, so whatever that thing is that animates your system, your body, um, that makes it possible for you to lift your arm and speak and have ideas, that is what I am calling power. And I understand when we are often referring to power these days, it means something like having power over somebody else. And in this case, that's not what we're talking about, or it's not what I'm talking about.
No.
It is, if it has to have any power over something, it's not really true power. It is, so that kind of,
Manipulation. It's
that's
manipulation. Yeah.
manipulation, right?
Yeah. And we don't want that kind of power. We want to talk about the kind of power that people can power up in their own lives and bring the power of positivity, even, or the power of connection. And so, animals are, for me anyway, when I think about this and getting ready for this show for months and months, I thought about this. Oh my gosh, what does it mean to be in a powerful relationship with an animal? So you do a lot of work in nature. You're very active on social media. You utilize the help of nature, silence animals, and you talked about participants touching their ancient essence. And learning how to integrate it into their daily physical life. And you do a lot of work with your dog, Z, who I love so much.
No.
I go to your Facebook page, and Z makes me happy every day. I look at these posts that make me feel happy. Or your horse, Tom. So your horse, Tom, and Z have really helped bridge, I think, your work with other people. When they watch even, they can get into that connection. And so tell us a little bit about how Z and Tom have bridged this for you as a practitioner.
Right. Well, the thing about animals is they haven't quite over intellectualized themselves away from the connection to all of life. Right. So humans have kind of done that in our, what some people call evolution, but it, in some ways, it's a separation more than, I mean, maybe it is an evolution. Well, it is evolution, but it is also a way of separating ourselves out from that which existed. Or how do I phrase this? So sometimes I might refer to it as, the self-organization of life.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so like life, the planet, and all of life that exists on it could completely exist without humans.
They don't really need us, do they?
No.
I feel like sometimes, I have a dog and a cat. So I'm very close to them. I work at home, so they're always with me. They're right next to me, whether I'm writing or, working on a project or something. And they seem very in tune with my energy. So if I'm upset about something, they know, and they just get so worried, and you can tell that they're trying to console and inquire about what's going on. I have never worked with horses in the way that you've worked. I've grown up riding horses. I've been around horses most of my life, on and off. But you have a special relationship with Tom, and you've brought other people into the horse arena to meditate with the horses. So let's talk about that. Now, what happens when you get a group of people together and they walk into the space? Walk us through what it's like for a participant to come and sign up for one of your meditations with the horses, and what happens when they come into the the area where you're working.
Right. Well, to be honest, it changes a little bit every time. So this is just one example. One example is when we might, well, actually, one just came up on my Facebook memories from last year. So I'll go with that one. And in that one, we happened to have an indoor arena. So that made us, there was a sand floor so we could sit down. All the humans sat down, and we brought the horses in and just let them first walk them around with a human, leading them, but then just let them be free. Took their halters off. They were just loose within the indoor arena, and so were the humans. And these particular horses from that event were both racehorses. One was a standard bred, so he raced with the cart behind him, and the other raced on the flat track. And things about horses, racehorses, is they get every single thing possible they need to thrive physically, but they are not given during their lifetime on the track much freedom. And these two horses had not really experienced it so much before this event. And so what is interesting about that is it's sort of symbolic of what so many humans, so many of us, were domesticated outside of our wild nature, right? And so same with these particular horses. And we all sat there in silence, experiencing the freedom to connect with one another based simply on the fact that we were there in presence with one another. Meaning we didn't have an agenda that we all agreed upon. We weren't there because we had the same belief systems. We were simply brought together, or we were together that night, experiencing the ability to simply be present with another. And it was new for the horses as much as it was new for the humans. And it was also one of those times where you realize horses have the ability to hurt us at any time, but they have no interest in doing that because they're very group oriented. They live in herds and they live peacefully within their own herd. They might squabble, every once in a while, but they want to always find peace within their group.
And that sounds like my family.
Yeah.
It's very family oriented. So when they walked into this space, I'm very curious about this because I know you do a lot of work with rescued racehorses. And so that's an interesting thing that you say about how they had never experienced this level of freedom before. And so what was their reaction when the humans were in this space and here they were in this space and, suddenly they were free to move about as they wanted to? What was their first reaction?
Well, it took them a little while. And I should be clear that these horses had been off the track. Both of them had been off the track for a while. It wasn't like they were brand new to being off the track, but even so, we humans have this tendency to believe we need to tell horses, dogs, whatever animal is in our area, we need to tell them what to do. And we especially do it with horses because they're so big and they can hurt us. So their first reaction was a little like they continued to follow the people who had been leading them. Because it didn't even really occur to them that they could wander off. But it didn't take them very long to figure out that they had that freedom, even though there were humans in their space with them. They were being given the same freedom they have when they were outside just with themselves. And so then they became really curious about each person, each single human. I know this for a fact, was greeted by each horse. Both of them came up to them, independently, and they explored each person and kind of got to know. I mean, I don't really know what the horses were doing for their own sake, but what it appeared to be from our perspective was they were getting to know each human that was in there with them. How did their energy feel? What did they smell like? Where did
they come from? Like a
where
curiosity.
Did they come from?
Who
Why
are
they
you
here? And what are they going to ask of me? And what, And one of those horses is very food motivated, so he was probably sniffing each human, wondering if they had treats somewhere in their pockets. But they finally, when they figured out they did not have to follow the rules and regulations, of course, each human also had the option to say, I don't like that, like if they were getting too pushy or something like that, everybody has the right to say that's not appropriate with me. Mm-hmm. But we weren't really asking the horses to do anything except for mingle with us, and they did a fine job of that.
So how were the human responses to this interaction?
Well, at first, this is a situation that we could go back to the power conversation. And one of the things that humans do to dissipate that feeling of building up their power within themselves is to talk. And so when the horses were first mingling around and people were talking about them and there was just this ongoing conversation, and then I realized what was happening, which was people were externalizing their experience instead of holding on to it and actually feeling it. And so I quieted down the talk, and that's when things shifted, and you could feel the energy shift. And I'd like to say it was deeper, but it wasn't even so much deeper. It was just more present. Everybody was more present because we weren't externalizing it with words and descriptions. And so the humans became almost overwhelmed with that extraordinary sense of presence that the horses and us being together in a group brought to them.
It's amazing how silence moves us into that, isn't it?
It is. And I think that's part of why we're afraid of silence. So many people are afraid of silence because it is so powerful.
Well, I think we should all try it. Maybe those listening today can set some time aside today to be in silence and see what comes up. Again, I'm talking to Katrina Clay. You can go to her website, katrinaclay.com, right here on KCAA, where no listeners left behind. We're talking about silence and animals and power and shamanic modern day life. And if you have any questions or would like to reach out to her, you can reach her on her website or find her on Facebook. And you can follow along with the wonderful adventures of her dog Z and her horse Tom, which she should be writing a book about, hopefully. Well, I've known Katrina myself for what feels like about 20 years, and I live close by. She lives in another town just outside where I live, and we've spent some time together, and I've always enjoyed her energy, and I'm talking about you while you're sitting right here, but I'm trying to tell the audience what a great person you are. I want to switch just for a second, go back to John Perkins. For those of you who aren't familiar with John Perkins, he wrote a best-selling book called The Economic Hitman, and he shared his story about how he came out of working for corporate industries who were going into third world countries and trying to set up infrastructures where these third world countries would have to pay into this infrastructure rehabilitation type thing. And then they'd be, prisoners to the loans that they would have to take out in order to do this. And then when they defaulted on the loans, the banks would come in and take their land, and we'd put military bases and all this. So his story really broke open a tremendous cesspool of whistleblowing type thing. And it was an amazing story. And his interview was fascinating. I really enjoyed talking to him way back in the early 2000s. And he's still doing work, but he managed to go into shamanic work, which I thought was interesting because he started to work with the local shamans, and the local communities are very shamanic based. And one thing that I've always noticed is the shamanic communities in most countries are highly targeted for destruction by the modern day, quote, civilized worlds that come in and just really want to destroy their way of life, their relationship with the land, how they work with the plants and the animals and each other. I don't know about anybody listening or you, Katrina, but I know for a fact that we really have to work hard to preserve that way of life and the understandings that they bring with them, because it really creates a tremendously different connection to the land. Nowadays, we don't see that so much. Don't you think? It's kind of like the digital world has brought us out of the nature world, and we are so disconnected. I think that is a big part of why our environment is in so much trouble, because we have disassociated from nature and we have disconnected from her, and we don't really realize the signs of change, the signs of distress, the signs of what needs to really happen. If we were suddenly left on our own to be on the land, lots of us would have major problems because we just haven't learned how to do that. Right. So that said, how do you see us kind of going back to nature or coming back to that connection? Talk a little bit about your vision with where we're at now with modern day society and how shamanism can really bring us back to the land roots.
Right. And so one thing you said was that our disconnection is why we're seeing problems within the environment. And I'd like to say, or add to that, and by saying that it's also, in my opinion, why we're seeing so many problems within the human species. One thing that nature provides for, I'm going to say for me, but I believe it to be for everybody, I happen to be awake to it, is that sense of pure belonging. Like, I belong to this earth because I am this earth. I am just like a grass growing up from the soil, other than I can walk because I don't have roots that hold me in one place, but I am just the same as a grass or a tree. And because we as a population are lacking a sense of belonging, or we're searching for a sense of belonging outside of ourselves, and or based on either our physical looks or our ideas or our thoughts, and feeling like we need to belong we only belong to groups where we have all the same ideas and same beliefs. And the natural world doesn't really separate like that so much. I mean, sure, probably, horses run together because they are all horses, and even lions are, they're one of the few, well, they are the only large cat that runs in groups, and they live in family groups, and it's based simply on being a family. But I'm getting a little lost. But my point is, we're lacking in our modern day a sense of belonging that nature itself can provide. And without that sense of belonging, we tend to, or it's possible to get caught up, and in filling that void, we might get addicted to a drug or depressed, and we don't know that this foundation of that isn't all the things that we're treating it with, but really this sense of not belonging to anything. Because really, if you belong to something simply because of your belief system or your likability, that can change so quickly. And so we know that, and it's too precarious. And on a level, perhaps not consciously, on an unconscious level, we seek something that is beyond that. And
well,
so it's not just
sense.
the earth.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think what happens is people tend to to want to navigate towards what they're comfortable with. And the conversation on a collective level now tends to be just what you said. Well, I'm only going to associate with people who think like me, believe like me,
Right.
and everybody else who doesn't, I'm going to disassociate from. How boring.
Exactly. Exactly. And really, when you boil it down, we have something in common with everybody, not necessarily all our beliefs or so, but if you meet somebody, you can find something in common with them.
Well, hopefully, yeah. And then even in the common, you can find something interesting to talk about, perhaps even that you don't have in common or
Right.
you don't
Yeah,
agree,
yeah, right.
Because I think we have to remember to value the opposite perspective of things in order to have a discussion or conversation or interaction that allows everybody's perspectives, all the possibilities get to trickle up, and then you end up having a fantastic conversation.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
there's more dynamics to it. Maybe it opens your mind to something a little differently. Nowadays, and I don't mean to bring politics up into this conversation, but it really does just seem that it's one side or the other, and
Right.
that's it. Hard line right down the middle, and nobody is open to listening to or trying to understand other people's perspectives, especially if they differ from their own.
Exactly.
Animals have a tendency, I think, to change the dialogue, the inner dialogue and the outer dialogue. And the people that don't, the people that abuse animals are a special breed of people that I think need to be sent to the moon or something, or maybe shipped off planet, because I think it's also like children. You have an innocent consciousness that is just an open book. First choice is love and happiness and the want to connect. And until somebody does something that is the opposite of that, they're just open like that and they don't close down. How do children and animals make us, I think, well, I guess let me ask you this. How do you see children and animals kind of being the same way, the same consciousness, this asking the same thing of the experiencer?
Well, it kind of goes back to what I said about animals not having they haven't thought themselves out of this self-organized life. So they haven't learned to, like, some of it is conditioning that we learn to not necessarily believe ourselves to be the same as a tree, or humans have children seem to instinctively know that. And then with time, we might get conditioned to believe something different. And the same with animals. But they never outgrow it typically. Maybe there's a random animal that has cognitively outthought themselves, but typically not. Typically they're present in the moment and aren't overthinking things. Maybe that's just enough.
Well, maybe humans need to learn to do that more too.
I agree.
Maybe the fact that they're not stuck in the past or the future. This is a very typical spiritual teaching, and you can find it in many, many different modalities and belief systems, is that the present moment is really the moment that we need to focus on at all times. The now has the most present energy, the most powerful focus, I think, that you could ever ask for. If we're stuck in the past, or we're worried about the future, or we're spending too much time trying to figure out the future or resolve the past, we really lose the magic of the present moment. Right. Now let's talk about animals as spirit guides. In the shamanic world, often animals are used as travel companions if you are doing some kind of deep meditation work, or if you're walking out in the woods and a certain animal crosses your path, they might have a certain meaning to them. And how does that work with your work, and what do you teach people that come to you to work with you about animal guides?
Well, animal guides are probably the main reason I even got interested in studying shamanism, because that appealed to me. And how I see it is they are energies that the animals themselves possess. And there's certain times in our lives when we need more of that energy, say, courage, something that the lion might bring to us. And if we might need a little more courage in our life, a lion can come to us in spirit. And sometimes we can actually just ask the lion to show us how courage might be seen in our own energetic field, and they can help us in that way. And so I once, a long time ago, I wanted to have my one animal spirit, and helper. And I asked the animals, who is my spirit guide? And they said, we all are. We just have different reasons for sharing certain teachings at different times. And we're always available to you. And to be honest, I still feel a little disappointed because it feels too vast. And at the same time, it's beautiful. But now other people will really work with just one animal throughout their whole life. And that animal can be a great teacher. You can go to it when you have a specific question you'd like answered, or guidance for how to follow or how to achieve a certain goal.
So for guidance, you can go to the animals for guidance, and each of them have characteristics that determine the energy that they're bringing. And that would be the same way in dreams, right? If we have a dream about an animal and we wake up and we're like, wow, what does that mean? And there's a book called Animals Speak by Ted Andrews that I have on my shelf. That's a constant reference because I have grown up understanding this as well. So if I find an animal that's crossed my path, whether it's in a dream or it's in real life, and I'm curious about what their characteristics are and what they might symbolize, I go to this book and I look it up, or I just look up the animal online itself and read about what its characteristics are and how that might pertain to what I'm going through at the moment. And it seems very helpful. Most of the time I'm with my own animals, the animals that I have, but every now and then the wild animals come across the path and they speak to you in a different way because they bring something. Like a hawk might land outside your window and you might think, wow, what a beautiful bird, but it might just be a deeper message. So how do we know when the message is deeper versus it's just a hawk landing out your window? How do you know when it's special?
Right. Well, usually you just know, right? You just feel it. And one way to really pay attention, or not a way to, one thing that's really key is to pay attention to what those animals are doing. Like I had an experience recently, and I haven't really given it much thought why, so I'm not sure why I'm bringing it up here. But a hawk landed on a branch that seriously was 20 feet, if that, away, and it started grooming itself. And it was a time when I was stopping by somebody's house to pick something up, and so in that situation, and again, I haven't pre-thought this out, so I don't really know what I'm going to say. But this is what you can do in your mind when something like this happens, is first pay attention to the bird. It caught my attention, so probably it had some significance to me. It was unusual that it had landed so close to us in conversation, and we were talking, so it wasn't concerned about the humans talking and making noise, and it was grooming itself. So now the thing about how animals can give us guidance is with their actions themselves. So in this case, grooming is they're cleaning their feathers in order to get off the dust and unnecessary accumulation that we all pick up along the way. And so that's what it was literally doing. And symbolically, for me, that might mean a message of clearing out the clutter, clearing out the built up stuff that we accumulate along the day's journey.
Well, the first thing that came to mind when you were sharing that story was self-care and the importance of how self-care can be vital to everybody's daily life, and how important it is to remember to put yourself first sometimes.
Yeah, right.
I mean, how many of us have problems with that? I mean, how many of us have such busy lives that we don't put ourselves first, or, because it seems selfish, or,
right.
Our priorities are something else. But self-care, I have come to learn self-care is one of the most vital top priorities. And if I'm not doing it, boy, do things kind of pop up to make me face that. Right?
Right.
So,
well,
yeah.
Yeah, what happens, in my opinion, is that if you're not taking care of yourself and not cleaning out like that bird who was grooming his feathers, if you're not doing that for yourself, what ends up happening is your actions and your behaviors and your decisions go through all that accumulated stuff. And so it's not a pure decision. It's not a pure action that you're taking. It's filtered through all that accumulated stuff. Does that make sense, or am I being
no, it makes total sense to me. It's like sludge. You have to kind of work through the sludge and clean it out.
Yeah. When you look at water that's full of sludge, you can see how something it's not pure. But when it's ourselves and our own energy systems, we can easily get the sludge is so much a part of what we're experiencing, we forget that it needs to be cleared out sometimes.
Because taking care of ourselves isn't always a priority. And then there's this other thing that, in a lot of spiritual circles, where if you get ill or something happens to you physically or pain comes in, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, right.
I really think that spiritual guilt stuff is for the birds.
Literally. I agree.
So birds should take it away and clean it out. We don't have to feel bad because of illness or physicality. I think our human body is a fantastically wise teacher. And pain comes in when we have to slow down and just rearrange our priorities, because every now and then we just have to do it. And maybe there is some lesson in it for you, but it's personal. And unless you need help, you don't need help, right? It's like communities that have kind of grown into this philosophy where illness is something to be shameful of, or you've done something to create it yourself and it's self-inflicted. Well, that may be true to some degree, but again, there's always a higher meaning and a higher symbolic gesture to that, I think. And we have to remember to have compassion for ourselves and for other people, and not make it so much about spiritual judgment as we should be feeling more supportive to people who are going through something. And I think it's a better win-win for everybody. And animals certainly know when people are going through difficult challenges, or their physical, needs are just depressed for some reason, for whatever reason. And also death. I mean, I've worked for hospice for a few years, and when I was with families who had animals and a person was going through their death cycle, the animals were very well aware of what was going on, and most often they didn't want anything to do with the sick person until it was actually time to die, which I thought was an interesting observation. Even when my own father passed away this year, his dog wouldn't go into the room because he just wouldn't. And we all thought, wow, that's so strange. We were kind of expecting him to go in and be very, loving and concerned. And we were just surprised. But then the day that he died, the dog walked into the room. And it was an unusual thing. And I especially took note of it. And later on that evening, he did pass away. But it was one of those things where, sometimes you think you know what they're going to do and they do kind of the opposite of it, but they're so intelligent and in tune with what's going on. Even the cat wouldn't go in there when he was the last week or so before he passed away. So it was an odd behavior for them that we noticed. But because we noticed it, we also got closer to him. And even in the hospice situations, the animals acted pretty similar. So it was kind of like, hey, they don't want to be around the person when they're dying. They're kind of respecting the space, but when it's actually time, they'll go in and say goodbye. It's amazing to me the intuitive intelligence that they hold, and I think we can learn a lot from them.
I agree.
So we're coming around the end of the show, and we've talked about a lot, and let's talk about your bigger vision for the world and what you see going on today, and how you can take your wisdom and what you've learned with your experience. How do you see things now and moving forward into the future?
Well, I guess my big vision, which to be honest, I'm not great about having, but when I bring it to my heart, I know that what I find to be needing to happen in our modern world is for us to reclaim that ancient part of ourselves that knows we are each all part of this one organism called Earth. Just as my hand is the same body as my heart, but they have two very different functions, so too is the tree and the human. We have different functions, but we're very much a part of one organism. And then for how we do that, it would be very different for each individual, but primarily it's about going back into ourselves and stripping down all of the conditioning that we have accumulated, all that sludge we were talking about earlier that we've accumulated throughout our life, and getting down to the purest essence of our own individual self. So we can, because we are ultimately all individuated and a part of the whole at the same time. And that is sometimes hard to grasp, that it's not one or the other, it is both.
Well, thank you for that. And I think you hit it right on the head when you say individuality is just as important as being part of the bigger picture. And our own life experiences do bring a different taste or a different flavor or taint, if you will, to the table. Not all of us have had the same life experience, and we grow and we continue to grow. When you run into somebody that you've known in high school and, it's 40 years later and they all go, oh, wow, it's like there's an expectation that you're still the same person you were way back then. And it's annoying when I find that happening because so much life has happened. How can you even stay put in one time frame and have all these years and life experience go by and still be the same person? We have to remember that people grow every single day. We're like plants.
That's right.
And, we may not grow taller, we might grow wider, but we don't get any bigger than we are now, right? But we grow as far as being a sentient, conscious being, right? We're conscious. We have a spiritual aspect to ourselves, regardless of what we believe. And we just have to accept the fact that individuality is kind of like we're all a diamond in the rough, but when we get shaped into that clear cut diamond, that what shapes us is the experiences we have. What shapes us is the successes and the failures and all the things in between that make us into that shiny cut diamond so that we can be original and authentic to ourselves. We're not here to be carbon copies of other people. We're not here to regurgitate someone else's life experience. We're here to embrace our own. And I think that what we've been talking about this past hour is a really good example of that.
Beautiful. I agree.
Well, do you have anything coming up that people can look into? You have any events coming up? Tell us what you have going on so we can maybe join you in some of your wonderful events.
Right. Well, I don't have anything actually scheduled at this time, but I do every full moon create a modern shamanic journey somewhere, usually here in the Saratoga Springs area of New York. And so then we do a modern shamanic journey on the full moon, and that's ongoing. But it changes location, and that's the part that's not scheduled. And then I do plan on putting together some events online, but how it is. You're afraid. I am afraid to say it out loud because
I didn't even promote this show because I was afraid it would jinx us.
Right.
Because but people listening are going, what is she talking about? And we tried to do this show multiple times over the last few months, and something always comes up to change it. So I said this time, well, instead of me posting anything about today's show or doing any pre-talk, I am just going to make sure we get this show recorded and get it on the file so that we can then share it. And, it's always magic with you, Katrina, when we do a show, because we really don't know what we're going to talk about. You and I have done radio shows over the years here and there, and I've been on different networks, and we've even done some Facebook Live stuff together. And we don't ever plan it. We just make the decision to do it, and we talk, and whatever comes up is spontaneous and organic. And I really like that element to it. And I do my shows this way as well. I don't script anything, and we just go and have a great conversation, and hopefully people out there listening enjoy it.
That's perfect. I love it.
Okay. Well, again, people, this is Katrina Clay. You can go to her website, katrinaclay.com. And you can find out all of her wonderful offerings and when she will be having events. And, take the time out to really appreciate your animals, pay attention to them, respect them. And I think you might find some interesting collaborations in your daily feelings and how you go about your life. So thank you so much, Katrina, for being here. It's been wonderful to have this conversation with you.
It has been. I thank you for bringing me on, Hillary. It's been great. And probably, as you were talking, Facebook is the easiest place to reach me.
Okay, Facebook then. Everybody go to Facebook and follow her adventures with Z and Tom. Well,
perfect.
All right, that wraps up our hour. Thank you so much for being here, folks. Real Talk Radio. I'm Hillary Ramo, right here on KCAA, where no listener is left behind. Until next time, take care.